Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Walthamstow in North East London to Enfield in North London. This ride takes about 40 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes more like an hour and requires a change of line, so you can really save time by getting on your bike. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute as well, then you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting at the Bell Junction in Walthamstow and we're going to use the protected cycle lanes down Forest Road. These lanes go westward in a straight line all the way to Tottenham Hale, but we're only going to be staying on them for a relatively short period of time today. The lanes are quite good and separate you from traffic down this busy road, although they're a bit on the narrow side, and as you can see, the parking spaces do have a bit of a door zone there leading into the track. We want to turn right into Wynn's Terrace here, and we're going to use the pedestrian and cycle zebra crossing to get over the road here, just to give us priority. The streets on the next section of this route are very quiet indeed. You can see we're running parallel to Lloyd Park on our right there, and the streets around Lloyd Park were recently included in a new low traffic neighbourhood introduced by Waltham Forest Council. This scheme, which we are inside the bounds of now, removed through traffic and through routes from a lot of streets in a pretty wide area around the park, and as a result it's made them a really pleasant place to ride a bike. For our purposes in this video, it's created a really nice filtered low traffic north-south connection linking from those protected cycle tracks on Forest Road, which we were just on. You can see coming up ahead why these streets are so quiet, and it's because of point closures like this one which we're going through now. Those closures mean that most people driving have no reason to drive down these streets unless they're accessing homes or businesses within the area. The London Borough of Waltham Forest, which we're in now, has done a really good job of carpeting its territory south of the North Circular with schemes like this. There are a few gaps in this one, so for example North Counters Road, which we're turning onto now, is quite a bit less quiet and does retain some through routes for traffic. You can see here that there are a couple of cars queuing at the traffic lights, but we're only on it for a couple of seconds, and when that light turns green we're going to turn off left onto the cycle lanes on Billet Road. These lanes do get us to where we need to go without having to ride on a busy road, but honestly they are a little bit of a bodged job and probably not Waltham Forest's finest work. Sections like this are okay, although you need to watch out for pedestrians straying off the pavement as they're not brilliantly demarcated. Other issues include the treatment of side roads like this one here. You can see that the lanes give up and turn into shared space, and we had to cut through that stationary line of traffic. If you look at the ground as well, you can see that there are issues with tree roots growing out of the trees, which makes the surface a bit uneven at certain points and also narrows the path where it's at its worst. If you're wondering why these lanes were built like this, it's because the trees are significantly older than the cycle path. So when the council came along a few years ago to build these cycle lanes, they had the option of spending a lot of money to move the trees or spending a lot less money and having a substandard cycle path, and they've clearly chosen the latter. To be honest, I'm not that surprised that they chose to do this. This isn't the busiest cycle route in Waltham Forest, and maybe the money was better spent elsewhere on some of the much more high quality schemes. I am still glad that those lanes were built, and substandard as they are, they do still help us get to where we need to go, and we wouldn't be able to do this route without them. Now, as you saw, we used that cycle crossing to pass by that parade of shops, and we now find ourselves in this residential estate here. This estate is one massive cul-de-sac. It doesn't go anywhere for motor traffic, and that's great news for us because it means that you can ride on a more or less empty street without being bothered. Do take note of the different twists and turns that I take to get this way, by the way. It can be a little bit confusing. If you do need help, you can always download a map of the route. It is linked in the description below, and it can be helpful for the sections which don't have as good wayfinding, especially the ones that have a lot of twists and turns. The file format is a GPX file, so you should be able to use it on any app or device. It's a standard format that works more or less everywhere. Now, we found ourselves in the Wild Marsh. I think this is a nice place to ride a bike, despite the gloomy appearance on the day I came down here and filmed in the winter. The paths are surfaced, although on wet days like this one, they can get a little bit muddy and mulchy, as you saw in that section that we just passed through. One thing I should point out of the marshes and also the River Lee navigations, which we're going on to now, is that there is no street lighting down here, so do take that into account if you're planning to do this route after dark. It is a little bit isolated down here, and obviously everyone has different personal tolerances for that kind of thing, so just take it into account when you decide whether or not to ride this route yourself. We want to use the chalk bridge to cross the River Lee here, and I'm actually going to dismount and walk my bike up. Not only is the bridge a little bit narrow, but there are also some quite small steps which prevent you from comfortably riding up there. I think you probably could just about ride up them, but I wouldn't recommend it. When we get to the other side of this chicane, I do get back on my bike, however, and we're off again. It's kind of a shame that I shot this video on such a gloomy day, because this is actually a really beautiful part of London if you like sort of urban nature. It really does feel like you're off in the countryside, but it's probably not showing at its best in this footage. We're going to leave the marshes now and exit onto Leaside Road, and note the shared space sign on that lamppost there. It is indicating that we're allowed to cycle on this pavement here. If you watch this channel regularly, you'll know that I'm not a fan of cycling on shared pavements, but this one is basically fine because there'll be effectively nobody walking on it, so it's almost like our own cycle path. Note these bollards along here, which I believe have been put there to stop people in vans from pulling up and parking on the pavement, which is really welcome. We then come to Angel Edmonton Road, where we actually get a proper two-way cycle track. This isn't the nicest place to ride a bike. It's right adjacent to a really busy highway, but it does get us where we need to go really directly. One frustrating feature of this cycle track is that it doesn't have priority over this side road, and we have to use a shared crossing to get over it. Not just once, but there are actually 2 points where you have to wait. On your left, note Meridian Water railway station, which is actually one of the UK's newer railway stations, having opened in 2019. You can get a train down to Stratford, and it's meant to be the centrepiece of a new development around here, which will feature probably around 10,000 new homes. They'll be largely built on ex-light industrial and commercial land, and these large sprawling car parks that you can see. So if this area does feel a little bit windswept now while I'm cycling through it, don't worry, it probably won't for long. I imagine there'll be towers rising out of the mud any second now. It's not super well connected at the moment by rail, but actually Meridian Water is on the branch line that would be integrated into Crossrail 2 if that's ever built, so it could be about to become very well connected if, say, the next government were to fund Crossrail 2, which I think there's a reasonable chance that they might do, but you never know. It's certainly at least a decade off as it is. Now, you might be a little bit confused as to why I'm leading you up what looks like a motorway overpaths, and that is a reasonable question, but there's actually an exit on the right here. to a secret little park, and you can see the green and blue sign on the lamppost there indicating where you need to turn, and the shared space sign on that bollard there telling you that you're allowed to cycle down here. This is Angel Walk, and it's a surprisingly nice place to ride a bike. It was refreshed a few years ago, and it now has this two-way cycle track with a surface of a different colour to the one on the pedestrian track, which is on the other side of a grass verge. And what I hope is that prevents pedestrians from wandering into the track. I'm sure it doesn't entirely, but it will certainly help. It did look a little bit worse for wear when we cycled down it on this day. It was a little bit gloomy and the weather wasn't fantastic, but it actually can look pretty nice in the summer. Trust me, when those plants are out, it's actually a pretty nice place to spend some time. After carefully crossing the road, we then find ourselves on Cemetery Walk. It's so called because if you look on the right of that wall there, to our right, that is a large cemetery, Tottenham Park Cemetery. The path here is slightly less well delineated from the pedestrian bit, but I was actually surprised when I came down here to see that it had been redone. There are stretches like this one where the path had become degraded, but it's actually been resurfaced to be a lot smoother, so it was a much nicer ride than the last time I came down here. It also looks like they were redoing the grass or planting on either side of the path just to make it a bit more pleasant. It kind of looked like a work in progress when I came down here, so if anyone lives locally and knows what the status of these works are a few months later, do let me know in the comments below because I'm interested. We now cross Plevna Road on this toucan crossing. Plevna Road, interestingly named after the Battle of Plevna in 1877-1878, which was a siege during the Russo-Turkish War. Apparently it is one of 18 streets in this country named after that battle. Be really careful as you cycle through the shared space in this retail park. It's not the best way for a cycle route, but if you look at those green and blue signs, you will see that it is actually an official TfL route, which will hopefully be improved in future and get its own separate path running through that development there. The route in question is called Cycleway 21, and we're actually going to continue to follow it for the next couple of minutes. So keep an eye out for C21 written on the ground, and also these green and blue signs that say C21 written on them on lampposts and poles. C21 is very much what used to be called a quiet way, a sort of route which threads its way through quiet back streets and connects up existing or improved paths to get you where you need to go. It doesn't feature any sort of fancy segregated cycle lanes down main roads. It's reasonably comfortable, and I think most people should be completely fine cycling on it. As you can see, there is little in the way of traffic. I think its probably biggest value is actually in its wayfinding, which really helps you thread a route through an area where it wouldn't necessarily otherwise be completely obvious which way to go, but you get these visual cues about where you need to turn. It all becomes a lot more legible. You can see those cycle symbols written on the ground there, and there's another sign up here on the pole pointing to you which way to go. While we follow C21, I just want to remind you that if you're enjoying this video and you'd like to see more like it, make sure you hit the subscribe button on the channel. We recently hit 10,000 subscribers, which I'm really pleased about, but there's always room for more. I'd also like to say my customary huge thank you to everyone who keeps the channel going by contributing on Patreon. You are all great, and if anyone else is watching, feeling generous and wants to contribute to the channel, then you can find a link to the Patreon page in the description below the video. Another thing that I've meant to mention more often on this channel is actually the map of all the routes. So you know how you can download the individual map of this route? Most people know about that. Well, some genius viewers have actually spliced all those maps together onto a single Google map, and they've connected into links to the different videos, so you can basically browse the videos by their location. There's even different layers for different years. Thanks so much to John for creating that, and also to Isaac for keeping it going and getting it updated every week. You guys are both great, and thanks to everybody else who also offered to help out with that one as well. It's by far the best way to browse these videos. You can see if I've done a route near where you live, or if there's a route somewhere where you don't know very well where you want to go, or if you just thought, what's it like cycling in this part of London I've never visited, you can check it out. So yeah, I've put a link to that in the description below the video. I always do under every video, and yeah, definitely take a look at that when you're done watching this one. Now, as you can see, this section of Cycleway 21 is mostly on traffic-free shared paths. They do vary in width depending on how much this undergrowth has been cleared. Sometimes the undergrowth does narrow the path significantly or make the surface a little bit mulchy, which is one of the downsides of this sort of cycle route, particularly in the winter when I filmed this. Fortunately, there are streetlights along the whole length of this C21 route, though of course the paths are still away from the roadway and some people might be uncomfortable by that, others might prefer it. Obviously you need to take that into account before you decide to do the route or not. But we are back on the back streets relatively soon, and we're following these cycle symbols and blue and green signs pointing us in the correct direction to link up with our next cycleway. And at the end of Blatesware Gardens, which we're on now, we are going to be joining Cycleway 20, which is a completely different kettle of fish. Cycleway 20 goes straight down the main road, and it has these protected cycle lanes the whole way, and I think it's rather good. Now, it does look like this is a one-way cycle track because of that arrow, but actually if you look carefully here at these cycle symbols, you can see that we're able to go in both directions along here. It's actually a two-way cycle track. Looks a little bit muddy today, as everything seems to do so. Negotiating this junction is a little bit confusing. What I did is I crossed here first, and then I also used the green light over the Toucan crossing here to join the main protected lane on Village Road. Now this is incredibly easy to follow as we're just going straight down the main road, and we've got these plastic wands with little curbs on them protecting the cycle lane from the general traffic. While they might not look like much, I think they do make a huge difference to how it feels to cycle down this road. Even when the traffic is relatively heavy or people are driving relatively fast, you do feel delineated from the general traffic. One detail that I think makes a big difference is that the bus stops have been done appropriately on this road. As you can see here, as we pass this bus shelter, the track actually goes through the bus stop boarding area. Now, if anybody's trying to board the bus there, you need to slow down and give them priority, or to get off the bus, it's the same. You do need to slow down and let them off. But 99.9% of the time, that won't be happening, and all that will happen is that you'll cycle past the bus stop without having to overtake a stop bus or swing out into traffic. Now, we were of course going northbound, but were we cycling southbound, this route would actually go on to the street called Green Lanes, which you might be familiar with. It runs partly through Enfield, which we're in now, but it also runs through Haringey and through Hackney. Hackney has put some cycle lanes on its section of Green Lanes, and unfortunately Haringey currently has a gap in the middle between Enfield and Hackney, but I think that Haringey is working on a plan to put protected lanes on its section of Green Lanes as well, which means that you might one day hopefully be able to cycle on a track like this all the way from Enfield through Haringey, through Hackney, and then perhaps even into the City of London as well, depending on the connections that are built south of there. At this end of the route, Enfield Council is also planning connecting cycle lanes all the way through Enfield Town Centre and even up to as far as Waltham Cross by the M25. So if you want to see routes like that, do make sure you hit subscribe, and I will explore them and post videos here for you. Now, unfortunately, our route was blocked at the last hurdle here by a very large scaffolding lorry parked in the cycle lane, so I'm just going to slightly dangerously edge around here. Normally you would use the crossing which it was parked on to get here, and we're just going to stop here right in the middle of Enfield town centre next to the Lidl. And you can see how far we've come. That is an incredibly direct route and it's largely traffic free. I'd be very happy to do that as my commute personally, although I would buy a good set of lights for doing those paths, especially in the winter. But I think it could be a really enjoyable ride really for anyone to do daily, but certainly as a leisure ride as well. There's a lot in Walthamstow. I highly recommend the William Morris House Museum, which is in Lloyd Park near where we started. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already. Do leave a like to boost the video in the YouTube algorithm if you want other people to find it. And thank you so much to everyone on the Patreon who helps keep the channel going. If anyone else wants to contribute too, then you can find a link in the description below the video. I'll see you all again next time.